Hey friends, I'm Ginny D, and today we are not just gonna talk about warlock pacts, we're gonna make one.
Are you prepared to seal our bargain?
Yep, all set, YouTube. I want to do something creative, but I also need money to live. Let's make a deal.
Loading. Pact of the Partner Program.
Can't wait. I'm sure this is gonna be a completely balanced and healthy partnership. I love warlocks, and I'm not afraid to say it. I think the pact system is basically a built-in story hook, and it makes for some really exciting narrative. But if players and DMs aren't careful, it's very easy for a warlock pact to become something that exists in backstory, but doesn't actually come up at the table. I know the rulebooks are more like guidelines, but the basic description of warlocks in the player's handbook straight up says that we want to avoid that. Where's that book lady? I have a name. Oh, what is it? You were right, it's book lady. Anyway, warlocks are driven by an insatiable need for knowledge and power, which compels them into their pacts and shapes their lives. The demands of their patrons drive warlocks toward adventure. I think we can all agree that D&D is the most fun when your character has a strong motivation to adventure. At the same time, I've also heard complaints that the warlock class can feed main character syndrome, and the whole plot of the campaign can end up revolving around one player's storyline. So how do we hit that sweet spot between a warlock patron being too central to the campaign and being completely missing from it? If you're a DM or a player who wants your warlock pact to be more than just set dressing, then this video is for you. We're gonna go over 3 core questions that players and DMs need to answer in order to create a compelling, dynamic warlock patron relationship. But first, we need to talk about what makes warlocks in particular such a difficult class to roleplay. More so than any other class, warlocks by nature demand communication, teamwork, and buy-in from both the player and the DM. I've heard from countless players who felt frustrated that their patron just never came up in the game, which left them feeling like they'd been deprived of a core part of their class choice. And I get why this happens. The Dungeon Master is playing the role of the patron, like an NPC, but an NPC that's key to the campaign and whose actions can have a major impact on player decisions and the whole direction of the story. That's a huge responsibility, and DMs are already dealing with a lot of huge responsibilities. No wonder warlock patrons get pushed to the back burner so often. Now, just like with any factor in D&D, you and the people at your table get to decide what your preferred table looks like. Book lady? Work with your DM to determine how big a part your pact will play in your character's adventuring career. Your patron's demands might drive you into adventures, or they might consist entirely of small favors you can do between adventures. The player and the DM get to decide how actively they want the warlock pact to play into the game. Is the patron placing regular, specific demands on their warlock? Do they pop up with a request every few sessions? Is the warlock largely left to their own devices? It's all up to you. It's entirely possible to play a warlock whose patron barely comes up in the game, just like it's also possible to play a warlock whose patron guides or attempts to guide their every step. This is a great thing to discuss in Session 0. If a DM is planning on the warlock patron being very present and pushy, but the player doesn't want that, then a conversation needs to happen, or maybe they should consider another class. Likewise, if a player is imagining a very active patron, but the DM isn't prepared to fill that role, it's better to know up front. Just like the warlock and the patron are making an agreement, so are the player and the DM. Setting expectations and boundaries will ensure that you're all on the same page and make the game more fun for everyone. But no matter how hands-on the patron is going to be, I've got 3 questions that players and DMs should answer if you want to involve the warlock patron in the game. Let's check out the first one. So, YouTube, you are an all-powerful tech giant. You have everything. Why make a deal at all? What do you want?
I am powerful, true, but I cannot create the one thing that fuels me: content. I only make money when my servants, partners, produce content.
So that's all I have to do? Make content?
Yes. You must create consistent, regular video.
That sounds doable.
That slowly narrows in niche, but is somehow never repetitive. Each video must be better than the one before it, forever, and ever, and ever.
I imagine that'll become really hard in a few years, but that's a problem for future Ginny. Step 1 is to identify what the patron wants. This might sound obvious, but I have seen and heard about so many games where this question is never really answered, or is only answered vaguely. But the more fully DMs can answer this question, the easier every part of role-playing the patron will be. By nature, a patron must want something. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to make bargains with mortals at all. There's something they need done that they either can't or don't want to do by themselves. themselves. Maybe they have no access to the prime material plane, so they need someone who can enact their will on people, places, items. Maybe the patron is trapped or endangered in some way and needs the warlock's help. Or maybe the warlock has a special skill or position that the patron wants access to. Maybe they simply need minions to spread their influence further. DMs can and should get creative here, but whatever you settle on, you should be able to answer the question, what use is the warlock to the patron? If your goal is for the warlock's relationship with their patron to define the character's arc, or even an arc of the campaign, I would go so far as to say that the patron should have a clearly defined mission, a specific goal that they're actively trying to reach, that all of the tasks they assign to their warlock are building to. That goal might be in line with the warlock's goals, in contradiction to them, or something even more complicated. Personally, I think the biggest brained idea is to link the patron's goal to another player character's storyline. Whether or not the warlock knows about their mission, how they feel about it, and what they do about it can make for an incredibly compelling character arc. Now, to be clear, the DM does not need to share all this information with the player. In many warlock-patron relationships, it wouldn't make sense for the patron to share their grand plans with their servant, at least not in full. Some patrons may even actively conceal their true feelings and plans from their warlock. But even if the patron's motivations are mysterious to the player, the DM needs to know them inside and out. If the patron doesn't have a goal, but the warlock's motivation for adventure is their pact, it can leave players feeling directionless during actual gameplay. So it's really important to make sure the players and the DM's expectations for this align.
Good God. Quick, lash me to the mast!
What? Why?
I hear the call of a siren. If I'm not restrained, I'll surely follow it out to sea. Listen.
Hey! Penny Dragon Games has been releasing their quarterly mag of holding for a whole year.
Do you hear that? How am I to resist such sweet music?
To celebrate, you can get the Pirates and Seafaring issue for free for the whole month of May. Adventures, NPCs, backgrounds, spells, magic items, extended rules, sea shanties, lore, interviews.
Faster! Faster! Oh God, I'm tying as fast as I can!
This is a fully illustrated PDF stuffed full of 100+ pages of content. And it's not just for DMs, there are player options too.
Did she say player options? Oh God, like a moth to the flame. Got it! You're safe, Captain.
This sucker retails for $15, but all you have to do is sign up for the Penny Dragon Games newsletter at the link in the description.
Wait, that's it?
Just sign up for a newsletter? That's actually a pretty great deal.
No, resist! Don't let her honeyed words.
And she's gone. Shoot. Now who's gonna untie me? All right, I'm ready to make content. Where do I sign?
Please read the following terms and conditions in full.
Wait, slow down. That's way too fast to read.
Click OK to accept your pact.
Oh, who am I kidding? I'm not gonna read that. Okay. A Warlock Pact isn't just the mechanical choice that determines features and abilities. It's a bargain, and like any bargain, it has terms. The player and the DM should discuss these terms, even if they're just discussing the fact that they are unknown, so that the player is aware of the potential consequences for their in-game choices. You may want to start with how the pact was made. This could have an impact on how strict or fair the terms of the bargain are, or even how much the Warlock knows about the pact. After all, a Warlock Pact can be made unknowingly. Let's try two examples. First, Warlock A is a talented musician. An Archfey heard their playing and proposed a deal. The Warlock would be given access to Fey powers, so long as they offered their musical services each year at the winter and summer solstice celebrations at the Archfey's court. Warlock B has always had awful night terrors since they were a child. One night, in the midst of a particularly horrific nightmare, a beautiful woman appeared and offered her hand. Desperate for help, the Warlock took it, thus unknowingly accepting a pact with an archdevil. Warlock A knows the clear terms of their deal. They agreed to play music twice a year at the Archfey's court. For the rest of the year, they're free as a bird. Warlock B, however, may not even know that they are a warlock. Their new powers might confuse or frighten them, and they may have to learn through experience what happens if they ignore the evil commands that the Archdevil gives them in their dreams. If you need a little help coming up with pact terms, Xanathar's Guide to Everything introduces a neat little rolling table with some ideas. A pact can range from a loose agreement to a formal contract with lengthy, detailed clauses and lists of requirements. The terms of a pact, what a warlock must do to receive a patron's favor, are always dictated by the patron. I'm not gonna read the whole table. Give me a D6. 6. When you use an Eldritch Invocation, you must speak your patron's name aloud or risk incurring its displeasure. Once you've settled on terms, you need to consider what happens if those terms are broken. I'm not saying the player or the warlock character need to know exactly what the consequences are, but I do think it's important to discuss this above table so that the player knows what they're dealing with. This seems like a good time to note that despite common belief to the contrary, there is no precedent in the rules as written for patrons being able to take away warlocks' powers if they disobey them. In fact, the player's handbook actually describes a warlock's Eldritch Invocations as— What are you, gunning for my job? Sorry, go ahead. Eldritch Invocations are described on page 107 as abiding magical ability, and on 105, the magic bestowed on a warlock is described as lasting alterations to the warlock's being. Now, that's not to say that you can't decide at your table that a broken pact and loss of access to magical abilities is narratively interesting, but this should be a decision that the player and the DM agree on, and everyone should be aware if a warlock losing their powers is a possibility, since doing so basically amounts to a house rule. Speaking of rules as written, Tasha's section on changing your subclass can also have interesting implications for warlocks. With your DM's approval, you can change your subclass when you would normally gain a new subclass feature. If you decide to make this change, choose another subclass that belongs to your class and replace all your old subclass features with the features of the new subclass. This sets up a really cool potential for a warlock switching patrons, whether that's through the warlock's betrayal or a mutual agreement, or even the patron making some sort of deal or trade with another patron. I also want to note that punishment is not the only tool a patron has to compel their warlock to do their bidding. I mean, we already know this, since the pact is made in the first place not as a threat, but as a bargain. Patrons have already chosen the carrot over the stick when making a pact, so DMs shouldn't forget that they can make that choice during gameplay too. My friend Cal pointed me to a section in the DMG about supernatural gifts. A supernatural gift is a special reward granted by a being or force of great magical power. Such supernatural gifts come in two forms: blessings and charms. Blessings are offered by a god or a godlike being and are pretty powerful, stuff like a permanent 2-point ability score increase, while charms are more minor, like limited access to a specific spell or temporary improvement of a weapon. Don't forget about positive rewards when working out the conditions of a deal. While one pact's terms may demand that a character do their patron's bidding or face the consequences, another pact's terms could instead allow the warlock to earn further rewards. Some pacts might allow for both. I'm sure some people will hear me suggest setting expectations and will say that I'm being too intense here, and that I'm advising DMs to take all the risk and surprise out of a warlock plotline. And that's definitely not my intent. But a warlock patron usually has some level of power over the warlock, and if the DM takes this too far, it can feel like a player is being punished for their choice of class. There are some real horror stories out there. I think it's good to remember that a player can explicitly tell their DM, hey, I love high stakes and mystery. I'm comfortable with my warlock patron pushing my character out of their comfort zone, and I'm okay with there being consequences if my character pushes back. Communication doesn't have to spoil the story, but it should establish trust. This is the kind of thing that's good to talk about in session 0. Discuss what everyone's goals are, establish boundaries, and make sure that the player and the DM are on the same page about what the pact entails. Well, that settles it. We have a pact now. What do I do if I have questions?
You are one of millions who serve me. You can ask your questions into the void, but they will never be answered, unless you have so many subscribers that you cannot be ignored.
What about 350,000? Is that enough? That feels like a lot.
Here, a pact boon.
This is just a plaque. Will you answer my questions now? Okay. Once the player and the DM know what the patron wants, how the pact was made, and what the terms of the deal are, it's time for a good old DTR. Define the relationship. Most of you probably already know this, but I know that I also have a lot of newcomers to D&D watching my videos, so I want to say this outright. This relationship does not have to be adversarial. The most common kind of warlock-patron relationship does seem to be one where the patron is somehow taking advantage of, tricking, or manipulating the warlock, but that is not by any means required. You can absolutely have a warlock-patron relationship that is positive, or even romantic. This isn't coming from me, this is literally coming from the player's handbook. I mean, yeah, it says, what kind of relationship do you have with your patron? Is it friendly, antagonistic, uneasy, or romantic? But don't lie, it's also coming from you. I can't help it. I just want Nimwin to raise her dead poet love from the grave as a lich and then become her warlock. It would be so messed up. You have a problem. Whatever. Anyway, the bottom line is your warlock-patron relationship can look however you want it to. It can be like the relationship between a cleric and a deity, an apprentice and a master, a child and a parent. It can be like the relationship between friends, co-workers, or spouses. In fact, Xanathar's Guide has a little rolling table for this too. It's called Patron Attitudes. Give me another D6. 4. Your patron is a strict disciplinarian, but treats you with a measure of respect. Kinky. Stop it. This is a great time to explore how the patron and the warlock communicate. Some of this is flavor, of course, whether the warlock receives messages by scroll, or skywrite, or vision, or something else, but some of it is quite practical. Can the warlock get in touch with their patron anytime? How clear is the information they receive? Unlike a cleric, warlocks don't have mechanically defined methods of communication, like commune or divine intervention. It's up to the DM to determine how accessible the patron is and how much information they provide. Maybe the patron can communicate with the warlock, but not the other way around. Maybe the warlock can perform a ritual to get in touch. Or maybe if they want favors or information from their patron, the warlock has to complete certain tasks in payment. There's no wrong way to do this, but a patron who is too available could end up coming off as favoritism at the table, while a patron who's not available enough could make a player feel like their class choices don't actually matter in the game. The easiest solution to this problem is, you guessed it, communicate above table about what the player should expect. Both the player and the DM need to establish, if not actually share with each other, the way that their side feels about this relationship. How does the warlock feel about the patron? Do they feel trapped and haunted by their pact? Are they rebellious and always looking for loopholes? Are they energized and eager to support their patron? Do they see it as just work and feel bored by it? Likewise, how does the patron feel about the warlock? Are they an important asset to them or just one of an army of servants? Is the patron invested in their growth, concerned about their safety, suspicious of their allegiance? These feelings don't at all have to line up. A patron might trust their warlock who is secretly planning to betray them. A warlock might feel a deep love for a cold, uncaring patron. It is often these conflicts that make a warlock-patron relationship dynamic and interesting instead of flat and static. I mentioned this in the beginning, but it bears repeating. No class choice, or really any character choice, should make the table feel unbalanced, like one person is the main character and the rest of the party is just supporting cast. I know some people have had bad experiences with warlocks taking up too much space at the table. That sucks, and I'm sorry. I would encourage you to remember that those bad experiences came from specific players, not from the warlock class. It is absolutely possible to play a warlock in a way that meshes well with the party and doesn't make anybody feel less important. And it's the DM's responsibility to ensure that every character is getting their share of the spotlight. And this doesn't have to mean removing a patron from the story. If anything, I think it's a great argument to give every character complex, important NPC relationships that are present throughout the game. When I asked you guys what you thought made a compelling warlock-patron relationship the other day, I got a lot of great answers. But I also got one that made me kind of sad. Somebody said, it's just flavor text for a different kind of caster. No one actually does that stuff except for YouTubers. I just want to be clear, that is completely false. If you don't want to dig deep into roleplay stuff, then don't. It's your game and you should do what's fun for you. But don't let anyone convince you that a table full of people who are excited to tell an in-depth story together is some sort of social media fabrication. It's not. You can find that kind of table, or make that kind of table. But it takes communication, which is hard. So check out my video about how to communicate with your table mates about what you do and don't want in a D&D campaign, so that you can all get the kind of game that you're looking for.